Hey there, what's up, movie freaks? How's everyone doing out there? Welcome back to another radical episode of Mike and Juju's Movie Corner. I'm your boy and your host, Mike.
And I'm Juju, ready to hang ten and ride the cinematic wave with all you beautiful people.
Or maybe break your wrist again.
Probably.
But nice energy there. So today we're diving into an action classic. This perfectly captures that early 90s extreme sports vibe.
That's right. As we promised, we're talking about Point Break, the
Don't y'all get it
1991
eventually?
adrenaline rush directed by Catherine Bigelow and starring Keanu Reeves and Patrick Swayze.
That's right. This is a movie that asks that question. What would happen when an FBI agent goes undercover in the surfing community and gets in way too deep?
Philosophical criminal surfers, skydiving bank robbers, and the immortal line, I am an FBI agent.
Alright, for all of our new listeners, here's how our show works here. First, we're going to give y'all a spoiler-free overview for anyone who hasn't seen the movie yet.
Which honestly should be illegal at this point. How have you not seen this masterpiece?
Yeah. Always the diplomat, Juju. Alright, anyway, after that, we're going to break down the plot, dig into those behind-the-scenes stuff, share some trivia, and, as always, give our hot takes on this one.
And we'll end up with our Mike and Juju's rating system.
That's right, y'all. So, wax up those surfboards, load up your Reagan mask into the trunk, and remember, the ultimate ride is the one you take to your death.
Yay!
Alright. If you somehow have actually made it through 30 plus years without experiencing the sun-soaked intensity of Point Break, here's what you need to know without spoiling the best parts.
Point Break is a 1991 action crime thriller directed by Catherine Bigelow about a rookie FBI agent named Johnny Utah, played by Keanu Reeves, who goes undercover to infiltrate a gang of bank robbers in the Southern California surfing scene.
Yeah, and these aren't your typical robbers, though. These guys call themselves the ex-presidents because they wear masks of former presidents during their heists. And they've managed to pull off quite a string of robberies without leaving any clues.
The FBI has a theory that the robbers might be surfers, based on some various scientific evidence involving tan lines and a knee injury. So naturally, they send Johnny Utah to learn how to surf and infiltrate the community.
Of course. And his investigation leads him to none other than Bodhi, played by the late Patrick Swayze. Now, he's a charismatic surfer philosopher who lives for that thrill of extreme experiences, and he might just be the leader of the ex-presidents.
As Utah gets deeper into the surfing lifestyle and closer to Bodhi's inner circle, he finds himself torn between his duty and as an FBI agent and his growing attachment to the surfer community, especially Bodhi, and a love interest named Tyler, played by Lori Petty.
Yeah. Who starred in Tank Girl. Alright, this is a part action movie, part crime thriller, part extreme sports showcase. And don't forget, romantic spiritual journey, y'all. Let's go.
The film features some absolutely stunning surfing and skydiving sequences that still hold up today,
Definitely.
even without all the CGI that would be used now.
Right? And it stars Keanu Reeves right as he was transitioning from his Bill and Ted comedy roles to more serious action roles. This was really that first glimpse we all got of the action star he would soon become.
Yes. And it features Patrick Swayze in one of his most iconic roles, coming off his massive successes with Dirty Dancing and Ghost, playing a character that perfectly utilizes his unique blend of intensity and spiritual depth.
Hey, and don't forget, let's talk about Butter Squash himself, Gary Busey, who does shine as Utah's grizzled, eccentric partner. He provides both that comic relief and that surprising emotional depth that you need in this.
If you're a fan of the 90s action movies with a philosophical edge, or if you just like watching beautiful people surf, skydive, and rob banks, this one's for you.
And just make sure you don't go out there expecting one of those typical by the numbers cop movies. Like this film, it really has an almost mystical quality at times, and it deals with themes of freedom, identity, and the search for that ultimate rush, y'all.
It's the kind of movie that made an entire generation of teens want to learn how to surf and jump out of planes, only to realize that robbing banks is, illegal and stuff.
Yeah, that's it. All right. Now we are getting into that spoiler territory. And if you haven't seen Point Break and you want to preserve the surprise of the ending, now is the time to skip ahead about 10 minutes or so.
Or better yet, just pause and go watch the movie right now. We'll wait. Seriously.
No, we won't. I don't know why he always tells you all that. We will not wait. So this film opens with Johnny Utah, a former college football star turned FBI rookie, and he's joining the LA outfit. He's assigned to partner with this older, cynical partner who's obsessed with a case involving these bank robbers known as the ex-presidents.
These guys have pulled off 27 bank robberies in 3 years, always during summer, always in and out in 90 seconds, and always making the bank manager open the vault.
Yeah, and Gary Busey has this wild theory that the robbers are surfers, based on security footage showing a tan line on one robber's wrist and another with a certain type of knee injury common in surfing accidents.
Which, let's be honest, is some pretty thin evidence.
Right?
But hey, it's the 90s, and the FBI profiling in movies was basically just vibes and hunches.
And Utah decides to go undercover as a surfer, despite having no surfing experience whatsoever. Like, his first attempts are pretty disastrous, y'all, until he meets Tyler Endicott, a tough female surfer who agrees to teach him.
Through Tyler, Johnny meets Bodhi, this charismatic surfer guru who preaches about the spiritual connection between humans and the ocean and how surfing is a path to enlightenment.
And Utah's really drawn into Bodhi's circle quick, which includes his close friends, Roach, Gourmet, and Nathaniel. And they accept Johnny straight into their group after he proves himself during this night surfing session.
Meanwhile, the ex-presidents pull off another robbery, and Utah starts to suspect that Bodhi and his friends might be the culprits, but he doesn't have any solid evidence.
Yeah, and things really start getting complicated when Utah starts developing real feelings for Tyler. And don't forget that bromance spawned with Bodhi. And at this point, he introduces himself to a lot of increasingly extreme activities like skydiving.
Mm-hmm. In one of the film's most iconic sequences, Bodhi convinces Utah to go skydiving without any training, which serves as both a bonding moment and a metaphor for Utah diving deeper into this dangerous underworld.
Yeah. And Utah finally gets the evidence he needs when he does spot a member of Bodhi's crew with an injury that matches the one sustained during a recent robbery. So what's he do? He organizes a raid on their house. But it goes wrong when another surfer group is mistakenly targeted.
During a big party, Utah finally confronts Bodhi, revealing he knows they're the ex-presidents, but Bodhi has leverage. He's developed a relationship with Tyler and threatens her safety.
And this leads to the film's biggest action sequence, y'all, where Utah is forced to join Bodhi on a bank robbery. And when it goes south, it goes south. Like there's a wild foot chase through the streets and alleys of LA.
Utah has the chance to shoot Bodhi, but can't bring himself to do it, firing his gun into the air instead in this incredibly dramatic moment where he screams, "I am an FBI agent."
But Bodhi escapes, and Tyler is taken along, forcing Utah to meet them at an airport where they're planning to flee the country. But first, Bodhi wants to go skydiving during a massive storm.
Utah jumps after him without a parachute,
Of course.
catches up to Bodhi midair, and manages to grab onto him as they plummet toward the ground, which is both implausible and totally awesome.
Right? And they both survive the landing. Bodhi does escape again, landing to the film's famous final confrontation.
Utah tracks Bodhi down to Bells Beach in Australia, where a once in 50 years storm is creating massive waves, the kind of legendary surf Bodhi has always talked about riding.
That's right. And despite knowing it is essentially a suicide mission to surf these monster waves, Bodhi paddles out for the final ride. While Utah catches up to him on the beach, but he decides not to arrest him, y'all, recognizing that Bodhi would rather die free than live in a prison.
The film ends with Utah throwing his FBI badge into the ocean, symbolically rejecting his old identity after being transformed by his experiences with Bodhi and the surfing world.
It's a surprisingly philosophical ending for what, on the surface, appears to just be an action film, y'all, showing how both men chose their own forms of freedom. Alright, y'all, let's dive into some fascinating behind-the-scenes stories about the making of Point Break.
The film was directed by Catherine Bigelow, who at the time was one of the few women directing big-budget action films in Hollywood.
Exactly. Bigelow had previously directed Near Dark and Blue Steel, but this one was her first major commercial success, grossing about $83.5 million worldwide against a budget of $24. That's almost 4 times.
Of course, she would later go on to become the first woman to win the Academy Award for Best Director for The Hurt Locker in 2010.
Let's go. And this screenplay was written by W. Peter Illett, based on a story by Rick King, though it went through several iterations before the filming, y'all.
Originally, the script was called Johnny Utah before being changed to Point Break, which refers to a surfing term for a type of wave that breaks as it hits a point of land jutting out from the coastline.
That's right. And the producers initially considered Matthew Broderick for the role of Johnny Utah before casting Keanu Reeves, which is kind of crazy.
And here's a mind-blowing fact. Patrick Swayze wasn't the first choice for Bodhi. The role was originally offered to Charlie Sheen and then to Johnny Depp, who both turned it down.
Huh. Swayze had to work hard to convince the producers, though, he was the right man for the part, as they were really concerned about his image after Dirty Dancing and Ghost with these love-type rom-coms.
But Swayze was actually an experienced skydiver in real life and did many of his own stunts in the film, including some of the skydiving scenes, which helped sell them on casting him.
That makes sense. In fact, Swayze performed 55 jumps for the film, y'all, though the most dangerous stunts were done by a professional skydiver.
Keanu Reeves, on the other hand, had no surfing or skydiving experience before the film and had to undergo intensive training for both.
That's right. He trained with professional surfer Dennis Jarvis for a whole 2 months before filming and continued training throughout production, apparently.
Despite that training, Reeves still used a surfing double for the most challenging scenes. Professional surfer Bojisi Christopher, who also played the character of Gourmet in the film.
That's right. The iconic foot chase through the neighborhoods of LA, now that was actually shot over a period of several weeks in a whole lot of different locations around the city.
That scene where Keanu fires his gun into the air and yells, "I am an FBI agent," has become one of the most quoted lines from the film, though Reeves has said he's a bit embarrassed by how he delivered it.
Alright, y'all, the famous final sequence at Bells Beach in Australia was actually filmed at Indian Beach in Oregon, as the production could not get the massive waves they needed in Australia during filming.
And those huge waves in the final scene, many of them were actually filmed in Hawaii with professional surfers tackling some genuinely dangerous conditions.
That's right. And the ex-president's masks worn during the robbery scenes, they were created by makeup effects artist Vincent Gastini, and they were quite difficult for the actors to wear apparently, as the visibility made it extremely limited.
Gary Busey, who played Angelo Papas, reportedly improvised many of his most memorable lines, including the famous meatball sandwich scene.
Alright, y'all, this film's budget kept growing during production due to the complex action sequences and location shooting, causing some tension with the studio and feedback.
Despite the growing budget concerns, Bigelow insisted on using practical stunts rather than special effects whenever possible, which is one reason why the action scenes still hold up so well today.
Yeah, when the film was released in July '91, it received mixed reviews from critics, with some dismissing it as just another dumb action movie.
Yeah. Roger Ebert gave it a 3.5 out of 4 stars, though, praising its energy and Bigelow's direction. Over time, critical appreciation for the film has grown significantly.
Yeah. Commercially, though, it was a modest success in theaters, but it made a massive hit on home video, y'all, eventually achieving genuine cult classic status.
The film's popularity led to a remake in 2015, also called Point Break, which attempted to update the story with even more extreme sports, but was critically panned and failed to capture the magic of the original.
Yeah, the original Point Break has been referenced and parodied countless times, y'all. Most famously in Edgar Wright's 2007 film Hot Fuzz, which contains numerous direct references and homages to this movie.
And there's even a stage production called Point Break Live, where an audience member is selected to play the role of Johnny Utah each night, reading their lines off cue cards as a nod to Keanu's wooden delivery.
And despite initially being seen as just another action flick, Point Break has endured as a cultural touchstone of 90s cinema, and it continues to influence action films today, y'all. Alright. Time for some random trivia, though.
Random trivia time.
This trivia will make you the most important at any party about old Gen X movies, y'all. Which, come on, you should all definitely host some kind of movie party and host a Mike and Juju's viewing party.
Let's just make sure you have plenty of meatball sandwiches and nicks and masks.
That's right. Alright, y'all, the famous line, fear causes hesitation, and hesitation will cause your worst fears to come true, became so popular that it was featured in motivational posters and a lot of self-help books after the film's release.
That's pure Bodhi wisdom right there. Speaking of Bodhi, its name comes from the Buddhist concept Bodhi, meaning awakening or enlightenment, which fits perfectly with his spiritual surfer character.
Definitely. That iconic Reagan mask worn by Swayze during the robberies, it was actually chosen specifically for him because it was the largest mask and could fit over all his hair. Like the other masks were assigned based on size as well.
Ah.
Patrick Swayze broke 4 ribs apparently while filming a surfing scene too, when he was crushed by a massive wave. But in true Bodhi fashion, he didn't stop. He continued filming despite this injury.
Talk about dedication to the craft. Keanu also got banged up during filming and still has scars from injuries he sustained while making the movie.
Yeah, the whole "I am an FBI agent" scene actually took a whole 27 takes to get right. At least that's what Catherine Bigelow says. Now, she kept pushing Keanu to reach a state of absolute frustration, which is why that emotion feels so raw in that scene.
Method directing at its finest, and that football sequence at the beginning of the film, that was added at the studio's insistence to establish Utah's athletic background, but wasn't in the original script.
That's right. And, let's be honest, the chemistry between Swayze and Reeves, it wasn't just acting, y'all. Like, they genuinely bonded during production, particularly during the skydiving training, and they remained friends afterwards.
Swayze actually convinced Reeves to do a tandem skydiving jump with him during production, even though it wasn't required for the film, just to help Keanu understand the thrill that drives Bodhi.
And let's not forget about Lori Petty, who played Tyler, of course. She had to fight for her role, y'all. Like, the studio initially wanted a more conveniently feminine actress. But hey, Bigelow insisted on someone who would be believable as a hardcore surfer, and it shines through.
And that authenticity shows on screen. Petty actually did learn to surf for the role and performed some of her own surfing scenes.
Yeah, and that whole famous 50-year storm that's mentioned in the film, that's a fictional concept created for the story. But it is based on the real phenomenon of unusually large storms that create massive waves at a lot of beaches around the world.
Bells Beach in Australia, where the final scene is set, is a real location. It is famous for its large waves, though not quite as massive as depicted in the film.
Yeah, and that punk band that plays during the raid scene is actually Red Cross. It's a real alternative rock band from California who were really big in the underground scene at that whole time.
And the fight scene was partially improvised, with real stuntmen taking actual hits to make it look more authentic.
Yeah, Anthony Kiedis of the Red Hot Chili Peppers has a small role as one of the surfers who fights with Utah. Now, he has no lines, but is that memorable beach confrontation scene that you remember.
The film's cinematographer, Donald Peterman, actually used special waterproof camera equipment that had just been developed to get those amazing surfing shots from in the water.
Perfect timing. And the scene where Utah empties his gun into the air in frustration, it's become so iconic. It's been referenced in numerous films and TV shows, including The Other Guys and Brooklyn Nine-Nine.
Before Point Break, Catherine Bigelow was married to James Cameron, and some critics have noted thematic similarities between this film and some of Cameron's work, particularly in the way they blend action with philosophical elements.
Does that mean she was behind his work or the other? Alright, y'all, the film's editor, though, Howard Smith, he had previously worked on The Terminator, and he would go on to edit The Crow, y'all, a masterpiece. And don't forget Master and Commander. I mean, really bringing his talent for tense action sequences to Point Break.
And the movie was shot in just 78 days, which is pretty impressive considering all the complex action sequences and location changes.
And the film's release date was actually pushed back to avoid competing with Terminator 2 Judgment Day, which featured Bigelow's ex-husband Cameron and her Point Break star's future franchise.
Talk about Hollywood connections. And here's a fun one. In early drafts of the script, Bodhi and his crew were actually going to be surfers by day and vampires by night.
Well, like, that concept was eventually dropped, thinking. But Bigelow did explore the whole vampire theme in her earlier film, Near Dark.
Thank goodness they dropped the vampire angle. I'm not sure even Patrick Swayze could pull off being a surfing, bank robbing, skydiving vampire.
I agree, Juju. Alright, let's talk about the legacy of Point Break, because I think this film has had a much bigger cultural impact than people realize.
Absolutely. It's one of those movies that wasn't necessarily a massive hit when it first came out, but has grown in stature and influence over the years.
Yeah, and the film has become a true cult classic, Juju, with devoted fans who can quote every line, and that regular midnight screening at indie theaters around the world.
It's almost a perfect definition of a cult film, initially underappreciated, but eventually recognized for its unique qualities and vision.
Yeah, and one of the biggest parts of its legacy, to be honest, is how it influenced action filmmaking. Like, Catherine Bigelow's direction of the action sequences, particularly that foot chase through LA, was groundbreaking in its kinetic energy and immediacy.
You can see its influence in countless action films that followed, from the Fast and the Furious franchise to the Hurt Locker, Bigelow's own Oscar-winning film.
Yeah, and the film also helped pioneer the extreme sports movie as a whole genre. Um, After Point Break, we got a wave of films featuring extreme sports as the central element of their plot.
Films like The Fast and the Furious, Triple X, and Blue Crush all owe a debt to Point Break for showing how adrenaline sports could be integrated into mainstream action plots.
And the complicated relationship between Utah and Bodhi, it really created a template for the cop and criminal who respect each other. That whole dynamic that became a staple for all action films in the 90s and beyond.
Think about films like Heat, Speed, and even The Dark Knight.
Right?
They all feature that same cat and mouse game between two characters who are in some ways mirror images of each other.
For Keanu Reeves, this was a film that really established him as this action star. And it paved the way for his later roles in Speed, and of course, that whole franchise, The Matrix.
And for Patrick Swayze, it showed his range beyond romantic leads and allowed him to play a character with real philosophical depth and complexity.
The film's fusion of action, philosophy, and spirituality, I mean, it was pretty unusual for the time. And it would go on to influence filmmakers who try to bring deeper themes to these genre films.
It's interesting how the film presents Bodhi's philosophy. It doesn't entirely condemn his search for meaning through extreme experience, even while acknowledging that his methods are criminal and destructive.
Don't forget that. That whole moral ambiguity was pretty rare in the early 90s action films. And it typically had more clear-cut heroes and clear-cut villains. Like Point Break blended and gave us one of cinema's most compelling anti-heroes in Patrick Swayze's portrayal as Bodhi.
The film also showcased Catherine Bigelow's talent for directing action and helped cement her place in Hollywood, though it would still be almost 2 decades before she received full recognition with The Hurt Locker.
And Point Break has also became famous for its homoeroticism. Let's be honest, whether intentional or not, the relationship between Utah and Bodhi has been analyzed in countless film theory classes for its homoerotic subtext.
That beach football scene alone has launched 1,000 academic papers. The film almost functions as a love story between these two men, with Tyler serving primarily to maintain a heterosexual framework.
And it's all worth noting the film's environmental themes, like Bodhi's references for the ocean and nature, like it was way ahead of its time in the mainstream action cinema.
His philosophy might be extreme, but his respect for natural forces and critique of commercialized society resonates even more today in our climate conscious era.
Right? And the quotability of this movie, I mean, it has ensured its ongoing popularity. Like lines like 100% pure adrenaline, fear causes hesitation, and the ultimate ride is the one to your death. Like these have all became pop culture lexicon.
And who can forget Back Off, War Child? Seriously, I use that line at least once a week in a completely inappropriate context.
Alright, y'all, the legacy of Point Break was officially recognized when it was selected for preservation in the National Film Registry by the Library of Congress in 2015 for being culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant.
It's also worth noting that the film's exploration of masculine identity and brotherhood has made it a favorite subject of gender studies, scholars examining how male relationships are portrayed in action cinema.
Yeah, the film's enduring popularity led to that 2015 remake that we mentioned earlier, which tried to update the concept of even more extreme sports, but what they missed in that was the philosophical depth and those character dynamics that made that original movie so special.
Yes. And sometimes you just can't recreate lightning in a bottle, which is what Bigelow, Swayze, and Reeves captured in the original.
Yeah, and Point Break continues to influence filmmakers today, y'all, particularly in its blend of visceral action and those deeper thematic concerns.
The film's legacy might be best summed up by Bodhi's line, "It's not tragic to die doing what you love." The film itself lives on precisely because it's so lovable despite, or perhaps because of, its excesses and eccentricities.
That's right. In a whole lot of ways, guys, Point Break is a perfect time capsule of early 90s American cinema. Stylistically bold, somewhat excessive, but hey, with an earnestness and energy that becomes increasingly rare in mainstream films. Alright, y'all, let's get into our personal takes on Point Break. Juju, what stands out to you about this film after all these long years?
For me, it's the perfect blend of high octane action and surprising philosophical depth. Most action films today don't even attempt to give their characters a coherent worldview, but Bodhi has this fully developed life philosophy.
Definitely. Even if his philosophy is ultimately destructive, there's something compelling about his search for authentic experience in a world of increasingly commercialism and conformity.
Swayze's performance is really the soul of the film for me. He makes Bodhi so charismatic that you almost want him to get away with it all, even though you know he's doing terrible things.
Or maybe it's that homoerotic point of view for you. He walks this perfect line where Bodhi is neither a hero nor a villain. Let's be honest. He's just someone pursuing his vision of freedom to its logical, traditional, tragic conclusion.
The scene that always gets me is that final moment on the beach in Australia, where Utah lets Bodhi paddle out to a certain death rather than taking him to prison.
That's right. Like, that's really a powerful ending because it shows how profoundly Utah has been changed by this relationship with Bodhi. Like, he's come to understand that some people truly would rather die free than have to live caged up.
If I had to critique anything, it's that some of the dialogue is a bit on the nose, especially in the more philosophical moments. Sometimes it veers into fortune cookie territory.
Fair point, but like lines like "this was never about the money, this was about us against the system," like that's not exactly subtle, but I think that straightforwardness is really part of the film's early 90s charm, Juju.
I also think Tyler's character gets somewhat sidelined in the second half of the film,
Right.
becoming more of a plot device than a fully developed character.
Exactly. I see that. Like, once the bromance between Utah and Bodhi takes center stage, like Tyler's role is primarily to create tension between them rather than having any kind of arc point.
Though I do appreciate that Lori Petty brings so much energy and authenticity to what could have been a very thankless role.
Yeah, she plays a great role. Very cute. Also, the action sequences, they still hold up really well, especially compared to many films from that era. Like, let's be honest. And the practical stunts and real surfing footage, like, it gives everything a visceral quality that CGI just is not going to replace today.
No, it can't. Especially that foot chase through the neighborhoods
Definitely.
with all those dogs and fences and backyards. It still feels so immediate and chaotic in the best possible way.
Right. Like, on your famous Mike and Juju's rating scale, where do you rate this one on a 0 out of 10 surfboards?
This is definitely 10 surfboards. It's not a perfect film, but it's perfect at being exactly what it is. A high concept action movie with surprising depth and unforgettable characters.
Right? Alright, so for me, I'll give it a strong 8.5 surfboards out of 10 surfboards. It's one of those rare action films that's actually aged well, Juju, because it relies on practical effects, genuine emotion, and timeless themes rather than a bunch of trendy gimmicks.
It's a film that understands the appeal of counterculture and rebellion in a way that feels authentic rather than just using those elements as window dressing.
That's right. And it does all that while still delivering some of the most exciting action sequences of its era, y'all.
Plus, it gave us Keanu Reeves screaming, "I am an FBI agent," while firing his gun in the air, which alone would make it worthy of preservation.
So for anyone who hasn't seen it, is it worth tracking down, Juju?
Absolutely. Especially for fans of action cinema who want to see one of the genre's most influential and unique entries.
Yeah, and for anyone interested in Catherine Bigelow's evolution as a filmmaker, like, this is a fascinating midpoint between her genre beginnings and her later acclaimed work.
So, there you have it. Point Break gets our definite Mike and Juju's awesome rating. A cult classic that continues to ride the wave of popularity decades after its release.
So, I had an 8.5, you had a 10. We'll say a 9.25 out of 10 surfboards was our final rating. And with that, that wraps up our deep dive into Point Break, y'all. From FBI investigations to philosophical surfers.
Adios, bruh.
Nice callback. Alright, before we go, let's remind everyone to like, subscribe, and hit that shiny notification bell so you do not miss out on our next episode, any of our other shows, or our lives or reactions, y'all.
Next week.
Nope, you stop. Y'all don't get to find out. I don't know why he's trying that. He started this whole thing.
I tried.
He started it.
I started it.
Alright. From surfers to whatever comes next week, we're really hitting all the high notes of the decade. Our recent deep dive into Patrick Swayze's full filmography might be something we should do. Like, it could really have people feeling feelings. So, tell us if you think we should.
If you have suggestions for movies you want us to cover, drop them in the comments below.
Yeah, that's right. As always, y'all, I'm your boy and your host, Mike.
I'm your co-host, Juju.
And we'll see y'all in the next one. All you movie freaks out there. Stay gold, movie freaks.